So, hi, hello, and welcome to Innovating for Consumer via Technologies. Which we will discuss for about 30 minutes, and we will start with introducing ourselves. So my name is Fredrik Timor, and I work for the Swedish Fashion Council as Head of Innovation. And I'm also setting up something called Fashion Innovation Center in Stockholm, where we're looking at new revenue streams and business model within the fashion industry. So Sandra, could you?
Hi, thank you, Fredrik. Thank you. Thanks, Jordana, for having me. I am Sandra Campos. I have been in retail my entire career and have been leading various brands. And now I actually have pivoted and moved into the tech side, leading a retail technology company with supply chain solutions as well, called Project Verte. So that's what I'm doing today.
Yeah. And Ganesh?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Fredrik. This is Ganesh Subramanian, founder and CEO of Stylumia. We are a deep tech startup based out of Bangalore in India. We are here reducing the guesswork in fashion and lifestyle retail globally and make the planet a lot more sustainable, both economically and environmentally.
Yeah. And Emma?
Hi, I'm Emma Lee. I've been in the fashion industry my entire career as well. I spent time at Coach, at Guild, American Express. Most recently, I'm at Tmall Global. So I'm the head of fashion for Tmall Global. Tmall Global is part of Alibaba Group, and we focus on B2C solution for the companies.
Yeah. And Nikita?
Hi, everyone, and thanks again for everybody's time today who's tuned in today. My name is Nikita Iyer, and I lead our strategic business development team at Moxtra. Moxtra powers one-stop digital channels as private digital destinations, as an app and a portal for different brands around the world to be able to provide a destination for their customers to engage through all stages of business, whether you're a designer, a buyer, a media company, a distributor, a manufacturer, or anything else.
Yeah. And Diana.
Hi everyone, I'm Dana. I'm the CEO of Bold Metrics. Bold Metrics is an AI technology that accurately predicts body measurements on a consumer, connects it with product data so customers can find the right size, whether they're shopping in store or online. And we curate and generate trends from the purchase and returns information to generate insights for product designers so that they can create better fitting clothes for their customers. And in general, I come from a tech background, and therefore so did a tech company. It's great to be on this panel.
Yeah, and it will be super interesting to start this discussion because with all your backgrounds, I think it will be super interesting. So let's start off with the first question, and it's, will the future fashion customer be a consumer or user according to you? What do you think? It's open for any of you to answer. So do any one of you have any thoughts on that question?
Well, I'll jump in there. This question, when you think of the fashion consumer, will it be consumer or user? And as I thought about it, I really considered it from what we're seeing with the evolution of the physical store. We're seeing a growing number of stores today, particularly seeing that happening before the pandemic. I think it'll continue to happen as we move forward, where stores are moving away from using their physical spaces for stocking inventory and driving purchases of that inventory, and instead creating these showroom experiences for consumers to really experience the brand in an entirely new way, and in turn the brand using these showroom experiences and digital experiences as well within the physical space to create and build a relationship with their customers in a whole new way. So I think it'll just be really interesting to continue to see these experiential fashion trends in store. Also, we're starting to see a lot new digital experiences online, and I think there's a lot of opportunity in the future for that to expand, and I expect to see more of that.
I can jump in there. I read a lot of books, right? And I can relate to this from that perspective that, I own physical books and at the same time own a lot of Kindle ebooks, right? Now, sometimes you get very emotionally attached and you want to hold that book and read, have a bookmark, all of that. If I see that, fashion, huge opportunity, I think there will be a balance, huge opportunity for closing the information gap. right? Today, brands are having one-time transactions of products with customers, right? How do we continue that? And when you make that as a service, right? Therefore, you are tracking the entire life cycle of the product. And all of us are talking about sustainability because you cannot close the sustainability loop if you don't close the information loop, right? So it's very important for us to have a complete track. And I see that this will be a progression. Some of the companies are already doing it, whether they are sending a box to the customer, they're attached to every transaction of the customer. And a question here is that more and more people join this, we'll be able to have a complete understanding of the wardrobe of the consumer, whether we are making the best use of it, right? And I also see that in the service model, that you will have the maximum utilization of resources, right? In other words, that we can conserve the resources that today that we are deploying. Now, from that perspective, at Stylumia, we enable all brands and retailers globally. We provide the information today which is missing by tracking millions of public data, impressions of consumers to come back and say collectively, what is the true demand in the market? Because what we see today is a huge amount of wastage in fashion because there is a huge gap between supply and demand, right? The more and more you have demand information, the supply can come closer. So we are trying our own bits of how do we bridge this gap by bringing knowledge to brand owners and retailers, right? We look forward to more views on this.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know what Sandra.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to share that, I've been in this industry my entire career. And one of the things that I've seen, regardless of where I've been leading businesses or been a part of a company, it's always that fashion is emotion. There's an emotional element to a consumer buying a fashion product, no matter what it is, right? So especially when you're a woman, and my career has always been with regards to women's businesses. But what I've seen also, one of the reasons I moved into tech, is that over the last 12 years that I've been really focusing on and trying to really push more digital acceleration and transformation of brands, is that we as an industry have been behind. We've been behind in really understanding where the consumer was going in terms of understanding like how complete the lifestyle is now with digital and the metrics around that, being able to truly have data that analyzes things. So I think we have to incorporate that thinking as well as the fact that like we are in 2021, the pandemic obviously changed everything and has us much more digitally focused now, but we still have to make sure that we're telling the story. I'm a big believer in brand and brand equity, but that we actually tell the story across multiple channels. So in the case of what I'm doing now in terms of Project Verte, we have the ability to help retailers extend across demand channels. So if you look at that from a user standpoint, yes, it's about users, because if you have one Shopify store, but you want to go onto multiple marketplaces because customer acquisition costs are so high, you need to have more eyeballs, you're looking to scale your business, we can do that for you. But that's again that's thinking about it from a user standpoint. So I kind of see both, and we're definitely at a transition point right now, an inflection point in the industry to say, how do we take something that we know has a very emotional element to it, does have to have branding and storytelling around it, but also think of it in terms of users like every other industry is doing now today, whether it's health and wellness industry, or if we've got, we talked about before in terms of music industry or Netflix and streaming and everything else. So I think there's a bit of a combination, but I definitely believe that we're at that tipping point now where we have to move more so into thinking of it as a user base and the data around that to help inform the decisions as we move forward in terms of product and making sure that we have the right amount of product so we don't have excess and everything else that goes into it.
It will be super interesting to hear what Emma says. That you represent a company that really works with a lot of users, so it would be really interesting to hear your comment.
Right. I think I would definitely echo on Sandra's point earlier. I think fashion is emotional. So I think at Alibaba, we actually believe in retail is entertainment for end consumers. So every business unit within Alibaba Group, we're always thinking about what that users or that consumer's journey is. So I think it's really about sort of when they wake up, we always think about what their daily activity looks like. So as they wake up, how do they find the brand? So it's about discovery for them on our platform. So it's about telling that brand story for them. So whether or not it's to follow their favorite influencers on one of the live streams to learn about the brand or the product story, and all the way to transaction. But what is the transaction happening? So we actually don't really believe in offline versus online. We actually see the future of commerce as new retail. So I think the consumer base in China, they're very digitally savvy, not savvy, they are digitally native. So I think they grow and they grow up in this environment that they don't see brick and mortar versus online. Everything is intertwined. It's the one sort of one experience for them. So I think it also goes back to where's the transaction happening? Is it purchasing online and then they get it delivered to them, or is it purchasing online and then pick up in store, or is it pick up in store and they can do some other services online? So I think there's all this journey that everything that we do, we're always thinking about that experience. What is the brand discovery to the transaction? Also aftercare, what that program looks like.
Yeah. So, Nikita, do you have anything that you want to say, or?
Yeah, absolutely. A few points on that. I think, I agree with different points from each person, each panelist thus far. I think most importantly, digital is unavoidable. So I'd like to start with that. Digital isn't going away. We're only becoming more digital as consumers, as users, as customers, as businesses. So that is where the world is going. We can deny it, but I think brands that do that will become increasingly irrelevant. So it's all about how you understand digital as a brand and how you leverage it. Sometimes I think in the industry, it scares people when you hear digital because you think that means detaching completely from an old model. And I think the brands that do it correctly, in my opinion, are the ones that leverage it in a way that lets them transition from one model to the next, which, as Emma said, is intertwined. It's not one or the other. Now, that being said, I think the way we think about it from a Moxtra perspective is if you look at consumers today are users because what they pay for is an experience. There was an article recently in the Wall Street Journal that said today's consumers buy experiences more than they buy products. And that's a large thing to consider when you realize that the way we all live is by opening our phones, clicking a button and expecting food delivery or an Uber to come pick us up. So if you think about that, I always like to bring up the Uber example because they built their entire business model around this idea of convenience and delivering consumer convenience to a user. So similarly, I think when we look at the fashion industry, sometimes it's simplifying the entire model and realizing when consumers wake up in the morning and users, they don't understand the back end systems that you have. All they want to know is, are you giving them an easy, engaging, interactive, and convenient way to engage with your brand? So for a large luxury brand, that might mean holding digital real estate on a customer's device, as well as offering an in-person showroom experience. And so you extend that brand to mobile, right? Because really you're trying to emulate mobile behavior, which is the expectation of anytime, any place engagement. But for some brands, maybe a small brand that doesn't necessarily need to have a brick and mortar store, today's market has opened it up such that mobile's given rise to a new delivery model. You can create your entire brand and in fact, create larger brand value with more exposure across larger markets and demographics because of what social media and these types of app-driven models have given us access to. So I think it is finding the balance of both and depending on which market you're coming from or whether you already have an existing brand or not.
Yeah, and I mean, also, the consumers of today are used to be users through the other services that we talked about. So I think they also expect what you all are talking about. They just expect that experience, like you said. But what I would love to do is connect back to Ganesh, what you said when closing the loop and go into the next question as well. When you talked about sustainability. So will the need for fashion sustainability drive new business model? So I think that kind of goes hand in hand, that how can we achieve this sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely, Frederick. When we talk about sustainability, I'm going to take a very, very different direction to the normal discussion on sustainability. We talked about the materials we use, we talk about these recycling, closing the loop. But I really want to talk about one business model where we can make a paradigm shift in the fashion industry globally. So let me give you quick statistics. Right, in 2018, this is a published figure that the world produced 150 billion garments, and 50 billion garments of them sold at discount, and close to 50 billion never sold at all. This is the entire fashion value chain. we're talking about a humongous, close to 2/3 of products don't meet the consumer demand in its right form. So let's face it. Now, this is one form of gap that we have between the supply side of fashion seems to be producing a lot more than the real demand is. For we looked at this problem in 2015 and asked, why is this happening for decades, right? For it's not that the effort is not being made, and therefore it's a complex problem. For we really need to ask this question. We ask this saying that, how do we get true demand of consumers? If only someone got true demand, that we would have gone closer to it. So we made that effort, and that's just one of the initiatives. The question here is, how do we decode the demand of consumers on an ongoing basis? In other words, can we put consumer at the center of our business model, right, and do everything around it? And we just address one side of it, bringing supply closer to demand, and the lot one can do about it. For some case studies there, we're able to improve velocity of products, which is the real reflection of impact of any of these, right? Anywhere between 2 to 4x. If you really looked at information, and of course, with all the human intuition, creativity, if you bring up both combination of this, the real demand velocity increases. It shifts key parameters, be it revenue, be it profit, be it inventory. The wonderful thing in fashion is we can hit two birds with one stone, which is you get economic sustainability and environmental sustainability at one go, right? For the point I'm placing on the table is that I think we really need to find ways of understanding consumer demand on an ongoing basis and bring these two ends of the supply chain closer and closer, right? And both in all dimensions, understanding demand, sensing, and also responding in some way across entire value chain, right from creation to distribution.
Yeah, all the way maybe to the end consumer offer as well. Or...
No, absolutely.
Emma, do you have anything? I mean, yeah. Oh, Sandra.
No, I was just going to say it's such a big challenge, right? Because exactly what you just said, Ganesh, it's from beginning through distribution, through to the consumer. It's all aspects. And I've been saying for years that this is, yes, sustainability has been a new business model, and we've all tried to impact it one way or the other. But it's not just about the fabrications. It's not just about the manufacturers and the factories. It also goes into your question is about new businesses, last mile deliveries, how you get your product, inventory, warehousing, micro fulfillments. These are all things that we're doing now too in the company that Project Verte now. But it's all about trying to think of every single piece of it, because it's great if you're putting all these efforts into new fabrications and new sustainable products. But then if you're actually shipping it from one part of the world to the other in a FedEx box overnight, and the box in and of itself fits inside a really big box, and then that's shipping costs, and that's transportation costs, and it's not closer to the customer, it kind of defeats the purpose. So every single piece of it really does need to be changed and disrupted. So right now I'm seeing on the supply chain side, what I'm seeing is at the end of this, from a distribution standpoint, we have a lot of opportunity as well to really focus our efforts on giving our clients, who are the retailers, ultimately, options on packaging solutions that are more sustainable, options in terms of last mile deliveries, options in terms of providing AI tools that give you information on where you should have your inventory, how much of it you should have, where it's closest to the consumer. Obviously, that requires data, and that requires information about where your customer and the demand and all of that. But it really is about trying to also get closer to the customer. So yes, there's going to be definitely even more. There are now more and more businesses that are starting to rise because of this challenge. And on the distribution side, it's going to continue.
So, I mean, one way listening to you, one way of saying it is that it's not one business model. It's several business models that needs to be switched.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do anyone else want to comment on?
Yeah, I'll comment on that. Oh,
no, go ahead.
Okay. Just echoing some of the things that Sandra and Ganesh spoke about, but also with the apparel industry, there's just so many areas of improvement in adapting sustainable practices as an industry. It's one of the biggest offenders of hurting the environment. The way that we think about it at Bold Metrics is the carbon footprint of a brand in the impact of returns. And so for us, how can we reduce returns and the shipping of product? A lot of times brands, when a product is returned, they're not repurposing and reselling, restocking that inventory, and instead it's going to a landfill, for example, which is horrifying to think about. So there's definitely practices that need to be put into place to help retailers and brands become more sustainable, because we're going to see, and we are seeing, that the consumer has that expectation, an increasing expectation for brands to adopt sustainable practices. And from the perspective of new business models that are emerging, really, I see it. There's just a lot of opportunity of different technology companies that are emerging on the market that have solutions, really viable solutions, to help the various aspects that a brand could improve upon within their sustainable efforts. And so I think we'll see a lot more ways that companies emerge and figure out what solutions they can provide to help brands reach those sustainable goals that they have, and it'll create this ecosystem towards a better future for all of us, and also aligned with what the consumer wants to see, that we're all being responsible to the planet that we live on.
By the way, I don't think Generation Z is going to be giving up on this at all. They're the biggest advocates that we have from a generation standpoint.
Absolutely. So, if anything, more than ever, right?
Absolutely.
Right. No, I think I just want to echo on all the points earlier. I think as we move to Gen Z, social media is basically giving the power back to the users and consumers. So as fashion industry, as we move forward, it's crucial and critical to always listen to what the users need. And I think traceability, transparency throughout the supply chain is what Gen Z needs to know. And I think going back to earlier on sort of the digitalization of what it means for the fashion industry. I think at Alibaba, we said new retail, it's beyond, it's not just about sort of setting up your digital strategy is to have your online store. That's not it. It's really about digitalizing your entire supply and retail chain. It's from manufacturing to marketing, to payment solution, to logistics, all the way to delivery to the last mile. Every touch point within the retail industry really needs to digitalize so that we can be sort of better and smarter and more efficient, and then create lesser footprint on the environment.
Yeah, and I think actually we started to answer the next question, which is what type of future products and services do you consider relevant for the fashion industry? I mean, in some of what you said, you already came up with a couple of solutions and products and services. But who wants to start talking about that? What types of products and services do you see relevant for the fashion industry going forward?
I can.
Oh no, yeah. You go ahead, Nikita. But the list is long. Go ahead.
I mean, I think obviously I don't know if I'm as well equipped, right, to answer from a pure fashion industry perspective, because my experience comes from the tech industry and working with fashion brands or manufacturing companies from that angle. But from that angle, my experience is, I believe that one of the most important things for brands, for entire companies to leverage, is a digital strategy that creates convenience. And I talked about this in my last point, but I think it is keeping it simple. And I'll give you a great example. Some of our clients at Moxtra, of course, we have designers who actually leverage having their own portal as a destination for their end customers. These could be couture clients, people, celebrities who are working closely with a stylist, right? And privacy and having an ongoing record of those contracts, interactions that almost mimics the way we text and interact on a day-to-day basis, but taking in every single other stage of business we need, in one place. That's important to that consumer. But it's just as important on the back end. It's not just for B2C. If you think about it from a B2B perspective of what the other panelists here were talking about, if you take a brand working with their retailers, one of the most important things for brands nowadays is finding new ways to expand their market exposure through building their retailer network. We just spoke to a brand yesterday. They're a huge fashion company, and they said one of the big things they're aiming for this year is to expand that retailer network, finding different ways and different channels to market their products. So, when they're working with Moxtra, they started off by thinking maybe we'll work with our end consumers. And now they're saying instead it's going to be a destination for us to manage our entire retailer network, vendor network, our manufacturing network. And I think that's one of the biggest things. It's sometimes it's an entire process, an entire chain of people who need that interaction to take place. And that interaction is not just, hey, let me pick up the phone and talk to you as a potential retailer once a month. It's giving you an easy way to reach me. And I think from a technology perspective, I always like to think about this term CRM. It's still to this day, I find it funny that the term CRM has customer in it. Because it's supposed to be about the customer, but the customer never really interacts with the CRM. What it really is technology for the back-end manager to manage his or her staff and keep a record. So what about that customer, that partner, that person you're working with through those business cycles? I think the more connectivity we can provide in an easier and convenient manner that actually supports the journey that the day-to-day person is going on, whether it's looking through a contract, updating inventory, those processes need to be better managed. And I think that's really what it's about as well.
Yeah. Do anyone else want to answer that question? What future products and services? Because one thing that I think is interesting or would love to know more about is a completely new services and completely new products that you can see. And especially both, of course, B2B, but do you see any consumer services, completely new ways of communicating with its consumer or user or whatever we want to call it?
I think there's so many different things that are happening and it's so exciting. I think we are in a very, very exciting time right now, even though obviously we've had a really challenging year in general, because there are so many new businesses that are starting and there's so many new things that are being developed. And I'm going to give a plug for something that has absolutely nothing to do with me, but because I don't have it, it's copy.ai from a business standpoint, and consumers can use it too, because it's a copywriting tool that actually helps. And I'm going to kind of go back to what Nikita was saying about simplification, right? And everything that we do, we need to simplify all of the different processes and all of the different tools that we have, because there's so much available to us, but we need to be able to simplify what it is, whether you're growing your business. And I'll go back to what Nikita was saying in terms of expanding across demand channels and finding one source and one company that can help you. Or if you're looking for, on the copy.ai example, it's not just about business to business. It's also for a consumer if they want to be able to use it for their social posts and they want to be able to have more copywriting skills for, if they want to become an entrepreneur. And I think we're seeing that too, right? We're at a time now where also there's going to be more and more entrepreneurs. So people starting their own businesses and trying to navigate through, well, how do we do this? Not only from a manufacturing standpoint, but how do we do this in terms of getting to the customer? How do we actually get those eyeballs? How do we, then what do we do afterwards? What's actually an order management system? What is a 3PL and how do we get there? I mean, all those different elements. I think that kind of merges between B2C and B2B because there's so many customers now, especially as we go into Generation Z that are and have their own businesses. Whether you look at Etsy and what they're doing, or if they're selling on Poshmark, they're really creating their own ecosystem that of all these different tools where they can sell their own products.
Yeah, I can jump in here with, you can call it maybe moonshot. How do we close? A lot of fashion industry challenges comes because of a lead time between inspiration and fulfillment, right? Now, how do you crash that exponentially, right? Imagine that we could create designs and we could fulfill this very close to real time. Now, it might look like a moonshot, but there are now conglomerates working across the industry segment where design generation to fulfillment in few days, right? With global supply chain fulfillment, right? Now, the point is that, how can we, a lot of partnership, I see a future where it's not about one company, one service provider or one supplier or one brand who will solve this problem. Coming together, it's a time for partnerships, coming together across intelligent service providers, manufacturers, brand owners, coming together and say, here are consumers, can we build a platform and use the platform to provide services, right? Similar to what's there in technology, you call it open source, right? A lot of what we do is all closed, right? How can we open it up and bring a lot of innovation, collective exponential innovation, and bringing this together? And just maybe to on closing. We've done something on the B2B side, which is this is basically a design assistant. You can actually create a new design using one of our solutions called Imagining, where you create a design which is never seen before in the world in few seconds. Right now, the idea is not to replace any creativity, just an assistant to augment designers to come out with products very fast. You can test that quickly through digitally, and you can close the creation, fulfillment, or demand signals very fast. Imagine that's available to consumer, right? And a consumer can actually play with it and bring that up straight away to the suppliers, and you have a fast fulfillment, and all of this happening in close to real time. So that's something that my vision of the future of where we can all work together to create that.
I agree. I mean, I think definitely that open source tools, for example, will play a role and need to play a role. I will jump a little bit because there was one question that I want to ask you, and then we have a question from the audience to Sandra as well before we close. But one question I think is super exciting to ask you is that could new fashion players enter the market through existing user and content? Do you think? I mean, players like Netflix or EA Games, for example, players that already have a user base, that already have credit cards, all the information, and also have an emotional connection with the audience. Could they be new fashion players? Could they disrupt the fashion industry? What do you think?
I'm going to be the only one jumping in here.
First.
I always have enough to say. No, yeah. I think that they already have, and they are, and they're going to become more and more important. And whether it's gaming and G-commerce, which is going to become its own thing, but that's, people have been trying to do this now for years, but it's something that and I just became more familiarized with it as well, because the company that I joined, Project Verte, is also doing this as well, which allows somebody in a game to be able to see a product and actually buy it and check out from the game. So this is going to become more real time. And, if you look at the stats and the amazingly large audience that's on games and female audience that's actually gaming, it's quite incredible. So I think it's absolutely going to continue to go more in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting if one of those players, whoever they are, define themselves as fashion players suddenly. I mean, could it even work?
Well, but then look, I mean, Nike recently came out and called themselves a technology company.
Yeah, I think it could go vice versa, definitely. Yeah, that's really.
And I can say that we're seeing that at Bold Metrics already. Interest from the gaming industry specifically, and using a technology like ours, we can very quickly produce an avatar that's representative of a person's actual body measurements. And so we can create basically their digital avatar, and they can use that within a gaming space. And it's I think very interesting in the gaming space how lucrative it is for within game to wear various outfits. So I can certainly see it's not too far of an extension to see that someone would want to actually purchase that outfit, that their digital entity, the digital identification, and have that and actually purchase these assets. So I think we'll see more of that. And I think it'll be really exciting. And we're already seeing interest from that industry and partnering with like some of the work that we're doing. So I think that's definitely an exciting future ahead of us.
It would be interesting to hear Emma's reflection as well, because you actually represent one of those players that could be have that potential of being us.
Right. So I think for our user base, for Singles Day, that's what we're most known for Global Shopping Festival. Gamification has always been a very important tool for any brand to talk to their user base. So I think it's really about sort of that entire journey. And then, like let's say for Pokemon in the past, for a brand, they can basically, design out this process to be, grabbing the coupons or any activities that you need before you purchase the items. Or even for Singles Day at the gala performances, the audience can, shake their phone, and then a coupon or the actual product will populate, and they can purchase everything without actually leaving viewing of the concert. So I think gamification has already been embedded into our app or our user experience for our customer base. So definitely is something that we are always looking at Alibaba.
Yeah. Now we have a couple of minutes left, so we have a couple of questions from the audience. We have one from Sandra. It's coming in from a large fashion brand CEO role to now the technology side of what's happening in fashion, what's the biggest shock, if any, when it comes to innovation that are not being utilized enough in the fashion industry? That's a good question.
Well, I think there's fear. And I think fear stops a lot of things that we want to do. I think it's also been, where like anything else new, when TVs, first came out and they were so expensive, or when the latest, greatest, et cetera, 4K comes out, it's so expensive and always gets a little bit less expensive over time. You don't realize that there's a lot of things that are actually quite inexpensive right now to be able to run your business and to be able to innovate. So there are tools that exist out there that I think people can just be more open-minded, because it may not be as overwhelming as you might think it is. And listen, coming from the retailer side myself, it certainly was. You have initiatives, you have objectives, you have resources, you have certain amount of capital that you can use. And so, it does become overwhelming when you look at this huge list of, I have to make all these changes just to become a more digital facing brand. But you can take them in bite size. There's a lot of companies that are doing things, again, much less expensively, but will really make pretty instrumental and pretty significant differences to the business. Even, and I go back to what I'm doing now because it's what I know today as it relates to if you want to add demand channels and you're taking your Shopify store or your Demandware platform and you're going to expand into 100 different marketplaces or several within that, it's not that costly. And going with companies that actually will help you grow your business and will just be a partner with you on the upside is much more cost effective than going and building, a huge platform and having long-term commitments and having to have consultants come in and integrate. It's very seamless now to be able to integrate platforms and integrate these tools within a platform. So I think that fear has kind of crippled some people in some cases. And, there's just a lot of open to listen now that I feel like could be enhancing people's businesses if you can kind of look at what's out there and be really open to new business models.
Is it a lack of experience as well? I mean, you haven't worked with innovation that much.
Lack of resources. Listen, you're running a business and you have lack of financial resources. You have a lack of human capital, how many people do you need to be able to take this? You've got IT, you've got e-com, everyone has objectives. You have to hit certain revenues. You've got to hit profitability. I mean, there's just a lot of demands on running a business. And so it's a matter of prioritization. So I don't know that it's about inexperience. It's just about having to reprioritize and finding the champions within an organization who are going to push something through, because ultimately, it's got to be seen through all the way. And having the knowledge and taking the meetings, first of all, creates knowledge, but then you're going to go a little bit deeper each time that you speak with a company or various companies to figure out what those opportunities are. And then when you actually see the case studies and you see the results that you can get, and you can actually find the ones that can actually work with the limited resources that you might have or you might want to put towards something and just test it a little bit. I mean, it exists, it's out there, it can be done. I just think that, it's overwhelming right now how much has to change for this industry.
Yeah, I agree completely. I've moved forward quickly because we only have a couple of minutes and a lot of questions from the audience. So, questions for Dana. With your solutions with AI for virtual fitting solutions, seeing a lot of different players coming into that space, how do you feel each differentiates? And if they do, can this become a joint effort in the technology world?
I'm laughing because my cat keeps jumping out.
I was seeing
the challenge of virtual conferences. We have the pets. She's decided she wants attention right now, so I apologize if she comes up again. Thanks for the question, for whoever asked that. And actually wanted to comment on a previous question I didn't speak to, sort of related on new technology that is needed in the fashion industry too. So, what we do at Bold Metrics is predict all the detailed body measurements on a customer by just surveying some basic questions. You don't need a measuring tape. You certainly don't need to take a selfie. So it converts quite well in an in-store or online environment. And so with that information, we then predict all of these detailed body measurements, relate that to the purchase and returns behavior. And we can create all these very interesting insights for product designers to understand how the clothes are actually fitting their customers and create a cyclical process within the product design cycle. So relating to the earlier topic of what's needed in the industry, and maybe even to the question just for Sandra, is their technology not being quite utilized? What I always found was surprising within the apparel industry is the lack of data that goes into the sizing specification design process. So typically there's a lack of data that goes into that, particularly around the data on your consumers' body measurements and who are your consumers from a body shape and size perspective. And so usually it's, identifying a fit model, which is a person they identify as, would be the average body measurements for a size medium for their brand, and then design the size medium to fit that person and create a gradation for the smaller and larger sizes, and use body scanning studies of generic geographical regions to understand fit coverage and how they're performing there. But there's really no kind of like scalable way to close the loop. So you have the product reach the market, but then really no way to understand, is it really fitting my customers? What are my customers in body shape and size and distribution of their body measurements? And so creating this connectivity, and Nikita talked a little bit about connectivity as we move towards digitization, being able to capture scalably and reliably the body measurements of your customers and connect within the organization, within a brand, the product designers with the consumers, and have this digital data-driven approach to product design. And I think that's one thing that differentiates anyways both metrics, but also just a lot of opportunity for various technology companies within the space of product design, digital connectivity, to help better understand and create better products, better inclusivity and sizing for our customers. So there's, I think, a lot of opportunity for future partnership in this area as well. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for the answer. So I'll move very quickly now because we have only a couple of minutes. And Ganesh, from the audience, is retail here to stay with us, seeing digital take such a huge role in the next of fashion?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, a lot generic. But when we consider digital, I see that, normally we think about digital is all about the channel. So in our view, digital is entirety of the sort of value chain. Right. And digital increases speed, increases response, increases understanding, transparency. So we see that the end-to-end value chain will get digitalized. Right. Now, what that means is that is here to stay. It will only exponentially increase. When that increases, the amount of data is exponentially going to increase. So therefore, the question here is not about going with digital. Therefore, what do we do with all of what we get out of digital? Right. So if you don't know how to use all of this data, take informed decision making, it'll completely transform the business. So it's as important, digitalizing is as important as understanding and using that data and taking intelligence out of it. I just want to leave a case study here. Sometime back, 6 months back, one brand came to us and we were talking, and they said, we are an analog distribution brand. We have huge distribution across tiers of towns. Digital intelligence is not relevant for us. 6 months down the line, same brand came back to us and said, we did a research, we lost market share. And when we asked the consumer, where did we lose the market? Who did we lose the market share to? Surprisingly, one of the world's largest online retailers' private brand. They never heard during COVID period, what happened is transformation happened and a lot of people started testing digital offerings, right? In that category, they never thought that a digital retailer's private brand will take their share. Now, what I'm trying to say is we, in the world which is transparent and competitive, we don't even know who our competition is, right? I think constant watch and keeping a close eye on that and taking information is my key point that I leave the audience with. A great question.
Yeah, and we have 2 minutes. So Emma, what's your take on experiential retail intertwined with e-commerce platforms? Do you see innovations in this space?
Yes, so I think this past year, we definitely see a lot of really interesting case studies happening on our platform. So I think fashion is really needing a lot of technology innovation, because I think it's not really about innovation within the industry. I think it's individual brand needs to find their own way of retelling their story or how to tell their story. So I think this past year, we have Cartier launching our platform for a year now. And then during Singles Day, they actually did a live stream for exclusive exhibition to showcase a $29 million necklace. At the same time, they bring that offline experience. They did this, they relaunched their watch, and then they did this showcase of in the Shanghai exhibition. So I think that's really the sort of bridging between online and also offline. And then we also did something with In Time. So it's COVID in the beginning of hitting the China market, all the department stores were closed down. So they were actually able to do live stream from the department stores for all the sort of the beauty, counters. Individual sales associate would just bring their iPhone and then doing live stream from their department store when they don't have visitors during the COVID period. So I think it sort of goes back to your question to Sandra earlier. Sometimes it's actually the fear, and also it's about they feel like this innovation or this digitalization is this huge overtaking, but it's actually not. Like you can easily take out your iPhone and you can do live stream from whatever you are to tell your brand story.